Hi.
I've been talking around it.
Nice.
Are you totally killing Movember?
What was that?
Are you crushing Movember?
Crushing Movember.
Our
Is
beard
that
ban-
what we're on at? Oh, I never thought about that. No, I don't know. I just thought it was the Phoenix Tag Soup tradition of drinking beer while talking with you guys.
Yeah. Hey, how's it going? We just started like a second ago.
Oh, cool.
A fortnight. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you guys awesome.
All right, good. So let me get that mouse off of your eyeball. That looks better. And not a hovery thing. And let's do this. So who are you?
My name is Avital. A lot of people call me Avi, so that's easier. I work for Meteor. I joined 6 months ago, 7 months ago or so. Prior to that, I worked at Asana. That's where I met Jeff, CEO of Meteor. That's how I ended up here. Um, there's a long story about kind of like Asana and Meteor, but I don't know if I'll get to that right now. But who am I? I'm an Israeli American. I was born in Israel. I moved to the US when I was 2 years old, lived in LA, moved back when I was 10, then lived in New York for a few years, moved back to Israel, and now I'm here in San Francisco. I have two children. I have a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-week-old son.
Wow,
Thank
congrats.
you.
And what do
And it's pretty awesome. Second child is much easier than first.
you Really? I'm opposite. I have two little girls, and this second one's crazy.
Oh, well, maybe he's going to become crazy. You think it was crazy at first?
Yes, I made her crazy, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, Galia asked me to bring this guy with me. That's my daughter, so that's why he's here.
Cool.
What else about myself? I don't know. I've been programming for a long time. Started as a kid, kind of like hacking stuff on BASIC, and kind of like since then grew and learned a bunch of stuff myself. And kind of one day said, oh, maybe I can actually find a job, and found a job, and have been doing that for a living for like kind of 10 years on and off. Um, I was on my way to be a math PhD student, but I quit that. I decided that math sucks. And no, sorry, math is awesome, but math, the way that people do it, sucks. And now I love programming. What else should I say? I've done a bunch of web stuff before, kind of like all sorts of ad hoc projects. And I learned to kind of hate the web. Web development kind of sucks. And that's part of why I think Meteor is so awesome, because in a sense we're fixing web development. We're making it sane. You don't have to learn about like 50 different modules and how to integrate them and like all these protocols and languages and like, oh, go to Stack Overflow every like few minutes to like find some weird bizarre bug that was maybe fixed 2 months ago in some old version. And that's a big part of what I think Meteor is kind of like rethinking what web development is, starting from what do we want the user experience to be, the developer experience, the way that consumer apps think about user experience, and like where do you put which button to make people feel most comfortable with the service. Meteor has the same approach for developers, basically. It's like, what would a developer want? And that kind of like goes into a lot of really nuanced decision-making processes of like, how do we prioritize different features, or what do we do when? I don't know if I could continue this path without spending another 10 minutes. I'll pause here and ask if there are any questions, or I can just keep on talking.
You got time.
All right. So I'm just gonna keep on rambling, and at the end I'll like go back to the things I may have missed. But the thing with Meteor is we really want to think about what goes through the mind of a web developer, just a developer in general, as they're going through these different steps of the evolution of their project. So like most projects, if you just want to start, you have to spend like hours or days just hooking things up. Like you have to choose which client-side library you want to use, which server framework you want to use, like which protocols you're going to have, like how everything's going to, and that in alone is just like this huge piece of work, and like it's very technical, and it has nothing to do with your business logic, with the actual app you're trying to build. And a lot of web developers kind of like that, because that's sometimes the appeal of the web, is like it's this weird Wild West where nothing makes sense, and like we're the pros and we know how to make like work around this WebSocket on Firefox bug in case you press escape or something. But we think that's stupid. We think you shouldn't need to be like a cowboy in the Wild West. You should be able to just write your app. And I guess a lot of people maybe say that, but we really, really, really dig into like the fine details of what you would want to be able to do and how to make it easiest on you. So if we try to tie this back into auth, which is what I was working on the past 6 months, we took Meteor from a state where every client had access to manipulate the data of any other, basically any user could manipulate any piece of data in the app, which is obviously not something you can build an app on. And we transitioned from that model to a model where you can still run data mutations on the client, but it goes through access control rules that are defined. And part of what we thought in that, the reasoning there was, you want to first write an insecure app. You want to, as quickly as possible, get off the ground, write your app, build a prototype, see that it works, flesh out your design, your interface, like which pages you have, and only then do you want to go and productionize it. So the way that most frameworks work, you have to think about a lot of things in advance. You have to define your schemas, you have to define your access rules, and here the idea is there are these different steps in the evolution of a project. First one is totally insecure, but works. And then you secure it, but you can choose when you secure it. You're not forced to do that in advance. And then even when you secure it, you can get to like different levels of securing it. You can secure things at a time, parts at a time. You can secure different collections at different steps. And kind of there's this natural flow where you're never forced to do work that you don't want to do. Like you always do the thing that's going to actually matter for the project you're working on. And that just makes people feel much more comfortable working with Meteor because you never say like, oh shit, I have to go do this chore. Or I mean, hopefully that's the ideal we're striving for. I don't know, what do I say about that? Let's stop with that and go back to, I guess, let's see. There's a set of questions, but I feel like I should just randomly talk about things. But
Yeah, just do what you want. But you said you worked on the auth side, right, for the last 6 months?
yeah.
So I'm guessing when you guys, you know, when it first launched, that was everyone's biggest gripe, and that's what everybody wanted. And how was that process, like coming up with the authentication, and what was that like working on it?
Yeah, the story there is when I joined the company, Jeff had been thinking about auth for a while, and he kind of got to a point where he had a bunch of ideas but had no time to work on them. And at the time, the claim was that it would take like a month to build it or something like that, which was like ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
But part of it was that there were like just a huge number of components. So the idea, the initial thought behind auth is just like thinking, what are the components that any system that has users and access control of any kind would like? And so it starts with you need to be able to define users. So you need the users collection, and you want to be able to interface that with just regular password accounts or with Facebook login or Twitter login. And so that was one component, just setting up the user records and how to integrate with external services. Then there's the data model where you should be able to write just updates from the client and somehow that's supposed to work. So how can that work? Well, you need to think about how you define rules on the server for which updates are allowed to pass and which aren't. So that kind of like informs a certain set of API questions. And there's like, how do you do encryption of username and password over the wire? We want to do better than the state of the art, so we use SRP rather than just sending passwords clear text on the wire. So the way it was thought is like, what are the components that we need to build? And those kind of just like came out of just the general question of what is the ideal development like platform, basically. And then each one of those just turned into like a month-long project where we sat and just like thought about it a lot and drew a bunch of diagrams and wrote some like ideas of what the API would be like. And each time we built 1 month of like some chunk of work, and we planned it so that each time we kind of like we shipped some of these things by sending emails to Meteor Core, to one of our mailing lists. And once a month or so, we would send emails saying, here's a new chunk of work. This is what you can now do, and please give us feedback and try to use it. And that was super helpful. People immediately used all these chunks of work, immediately gave us feedback. We had like 20 common threads with people giving us like really insightful comments about like nuanced API changes we should make, or things we didn't anticipate, like what are you going to do about DDoS in this case. And each one of those questions it was so inspiring. It was like, wow, people are actually using this, and immediately giving us feedback within days. And the idea was that we made sure to plan those chunks so that you can always, each chunk can be used. Like the first chunk we shipped was just Facebook and Google users and integration. And I think that chunk didn't have any of the access control rules or something. It was just like logging in. And then, yeah, I mean, basically we just made sure, now like looking back, it seems like a big like blurred. That it was, we really were very focused at identifying good stopping points and not looking at this one huge project because we would never finish it if we were not to split it up that way. And each chunk made so much sense once we started it that there was not that much thought we had to think. It was kind of like we were in autopilot mode. We were like, okay, we have to build Facebook integration now. Let's just make it happen. And then we just like sat and coded it until it worked, basically. So there was this nice thing where we thought a lot at the beginning, and then we didn't think almost at all while working on it. And then at the end, we thought a lot again because we got a bunch of stuff wrong, like APIs were wrong and all sorts of small bugs. So at the end, what we did is we did this big, we called it a pizza party, but there was actually no pizza there. But David Glasser, Nick, and I sat in a room and went over the entire diff against the master branch, like all the work we had done over 6 months, and basically talked about every line of code and fixed like 5,000 things or something like that there. So it was kind of like planned that way, like think a lot at first, then don't think at all and get a lot of work done, and then think a lot. And I think that worked really well. I don't know if there's like anything more specific I can say about how we came up with the design. Looking back, it seems obvious. Like, of course, this is how we want to do it. But I acknowledge that it's kind of revolutionary or something, I guess. I don't know. I don't have a great answer for how we like came up with it. We just...
Was your beer involved?
Was there beer involved? In the actual thinking, I don't know. We drink beer, but I don't know if it's directly integrated with our discussions or something like that. Let's see, what stories are there from that work? I don't know. It was kind of like, the cool thing about it, and I guess I already said this, but like, for 6 months or so, I was working, it was mainly me, Nick Martin helped me part of the time, towards the end David Glasser joined. Most of the time, there was no thinking involved because things just had to be done a certain way. Like, we defined the interfaces in a way that it was obvious what, you just needed to make this function end up returning that value. And that had already been planned. So at this point, it's just a matter of execution. And the fact that we could not think while working on this made it really easy to do it. Then at the end, it's kind of like I zoomed out for a second. I was like, wait a second. We just wrote all this code, and it's not on the master branch. Like one day we're going to merge it in, and it's supposed to work. And it was kind of terrifying. I was like, wait, I haven't thought for 6 months. This is supposed to work. Like, will it work? And when we merged it to master, I guess the develop branch beforehand, I remember I had this like intense feeling of like this is this rocket ship that's like landing and joining the Earth, where the Earth represents the develop branch, I guess, in this metaphor. And I was expecting it to crash, but it didn't. It actually just worked. And like we sent out the email saying like, here, version 050 is ready, try it out. Everybody tried it out and just said good things. It's kind of like, I was like, what's going on? But yeah, I mean, ever since, feedback has been super positive, and people have found some bugs. We fixed them. There are a few outstanding bugs that are relatively minor. People have been sending us pull requests pretty regularly. I mean, it's kind of amazing to work in a project where there's a really active community that's just using every new feature we ship. People send us pull requests all the time, suggest changes we might make. And honestly, people, like the amount of time that I spend maintaining it now is like really low, and the amount of work that other people are doing for us is pretty high, that it's just like amazing. We kind of just like are not working on it at all anymore, basically. And people are building apps with it, and it works. So it's super exciting. It was a really inspiring first project to do. It really set up like the rest of my work at the company kind of like around that. It's like, I can take on big projects and execute on them. That's something that other people, I've been trying to introduce this, like, don't always think in the Meteor culture, because people at Meteor like to think a lot. Everybody's really, really smart here. That's sometimes a problem. So the thing that I want us to get to is, like, think when thinking is the right thing, and then execute without thinking when that's the right thing, and alternate between the two rather than always be thinking and executing, because then you just get neither of them done effectively. At least that's how I see it.
So what was the process like between those two things? Like, is it a week of coming up with all these plans on how things are supposed to be working, and like you said, what these functions should be returning, and then X amount of time sort of executing that? Or, I mean, like, how did that all work out?
Yeah, the process was more or less one of us or two of us sit and think about one of these parts, write up a short document describing the interfaces we think are right, then either just talk about it some more or bring someone else and kind of like see if anybody could come up with objections just by looking at the APIs. And then once we have this list of APIs, they say, this is what we're going to build, these are the functions, this is what they need to do, then just go and do them. And then as in the process of making those changes, sometimes you find that you got it wrong, like you need additional APIs or you missed some details. So then at the end, you have this new design that's like the original design, but with some changes. And then we would have another meeting where we said, okay, this is what we ended up doing, and then see if anybody has feedback about those additional changes that were not anticipated in advance. And that really worked well. I mean, part of that is just a function of like how experienced people here are. Like a lot of people here can see something and say, oh, like this reminds me of this Unix Kerberos auth thing. They don't need that method. Why do we need it? And they're like, oh, you're right. Why do we need this? Oh, maybe we don't. You know, or alternatively, we do because this is the web, and for reason A, B, and C, it's different because JavaScript is stupid or something. You know. So a lot of what informed the design that we ended up with was how more traditional systems build auth and accounts. Because a lot of the stuff that we see on the web is people think they're reinventing this like new brand universe where like JavaScript is this new thing, the web is new, HTML is new. Like that's not actually that true. Like the web is not actually that different than client-server architecture in Java or C++ or whatever it is we used to do. It was different when we had Rails, when the server rendered HTML. That was a different model. That would be equivalent to a server sending down an exe file and then the client having to run that file. But contemporary web apps that are, I guess, real-time or there's a client component, server component, they kind of just work the same way. So there's much more lessons you can learn from looking at like Unix and traditional systems than you can learn by looking at Rails and Django and stuff like that. Not that there's not to learn from Rails and Django, there's that too. But we try to be more inspired by traditional software engineering than like web development. Yeah. Trying to think if there are any other interesting like stories from the process of auth. You pointed out that that was people's main concern. There was this funny thing where when we launched, people said things like, Meteor looks really awesome, does all these awesome things, but I can't believe they didn't do auth. Like that's totally stupid. Like this project is just for toys. And we're kind of unsure like how people thought that because I think it was evident that we were really serious about this. So for somebody to assume that we thought about a bunch of things and not about like the most basic security is kind of weird. So the main thing was we wanted to make the people who have these weird complaints about Meteor that don't really make too sense, we want to basically like quiet them down. Like there's always going to be haters, but they should at least hate for legitimate reasons. So we took the number one illegitimate reason. I guess it was legitimate since we didn't have it, but it was illegitimate to say that Meteor is just for toys because of it. And we solved that. And now we're in a state where there are no fundamental objections. You can just build an app in Meteor. It works. Like people are doing that. There are certain limitations you hit with server performance that we're working on now, but basically, I've built some pet projects in Meteor, and I'm going to be totally honest. Like it's just the best. Like I would never go back. It's just like unimaginable how much work you have to do if you're not using Meteor for stuff that have nothing to do with your app, just like nothing at all. You're just like making bytes like flow correctly between different components and like handling edge cases and Meteor just solves all of that. And the way that Meteor solves that is by just kind of rethinking the architecture of real-time apps and introducing the proper abstractions. And like I can get into some details, but like a lot of other frameworks will say, if you want to update the display, go and send a REST call to your server and populate the display. But that has no support for real-time updates. You have to hook in your own code for real-time updates. There's all this stuff you have to do. And Meteor just like solves the obvious problems for you. And I mean, basically just focus on, writing your app. It's kind of like, what everybody was always hoping for. I think we're actually doing it. I suggest to anyone who hasn't at least tried, you should try building some small pet project in Meteor. Like just, find something you could do in like a weekend or a day or a night or something. And just try it. I mean, like, even if you're going to end up going back to using Ember, Backbone, or whatever it is you're using, like, I think everyone should try.
So, like, you bring up Ember and Backbone. Is that sort of you guys are like competing with, or I mean, I don't know the right word, I guess.
I would say competition. There are two like kind of forms of competition for Meteor. One is like proper competition. Other frameworks or companies trying to build a service like Meteor, which is a full stack reactive solution. Derby.js is kind of like the only other one that exists. There's also like a Yahoo Mojito project that basically nobody knows about. Derby is also kind of like much smaller than Meteor. There's much less activity. Um, it kind of seems like they're dying. I don't know. Like I'm trying to be, objective here, but um, like the last question posted on Stack Overflow was like 2 weeks after the one beforehand. Meteor has like a Stack Overflow question a day or something. Um, and so we kind of like don't really have like full proper actual competitors, like actual companies currently now trying to do a similar thing that we're competing with. What we do have is this soft competition against a bunch of kind of like ad hoc frameworks that people build and work with. People will set up apps with Backbone and Node.js and Redis and Socket.io and some like specific combination of technologies, or Ember and Rails and something, or like Angular and Deploy D, or there's all these like setups, and each one of them, I guess, has some things that Meteor doesn't have. Like so a lot of these projects have been around for much longer than Meteor. Like Angular's been around for 3 years or something. Meteor's been around for, I guess, a year or so. Um, so the competition there is a bit more delicate because it's a question of who's going to be building the app. So there are people who like to build frameworks. They like to like combine components. They like to be web cowboys. Those people kind of like don't want to use Meteor because it's less fun. You don't get to do all this like fun, dirty work or something. They like to use Backbone and Node.js. Like that's not what they'll say. They'll say like, no, Meteor is bad because it's a black box. You can't understand what's happening inside, and that's wrong because we have packages and they're actually like well modularized. You actually can understand what's going on. But really, I think what they want to do is they just want to hook things up themselves. Like that's what they do. That's like what they're best at. They're like these ninjas at web development. So I don't think we're trying to persuade those people. There's always going to be people who prefer not to use Meteor and say like I want to roll my own framework. But really, what we're going for is situations where people just want to build an app, and that could be a startup trying to prototype something and work through like various MVPs to see what works. And ideally, it ends up with large companies that build internal apps like, huge companies like Fidelity or, all these New York City Skyrise and Midtown companies. They build a shit ton of internal apps written all in Java. And they want to transition them all to be web apps. They want them all to be real time. And basically, it's just too hard to use the existing tools there. And we just think that we have a unique offering, essentially, at least for now, saying this is the only way right now you have to just out of the box build a real-time app. Yeah, I mean, that's the end of the sentence, basically. Like, just out of the box, build a real-time app. Just do it. Just start writing your app. There's no other system like it. I guess, arguably, Derby is like it. But Derby is just, maintenance on Derby is very low. And we also think we're doing a better job than Derby. I can get to details if that matters. But like Derby is attached to Node. There's this thing with Node.js. Like Node is many things. Node is a platform for running JavaScript on the server. It works very well as that. Node is also an ecosystem of packages and just like development paradigms like the async model, which we diverge from. We think the async model is not in the best benefit of the developer. We think it's just harder to use it. Even with all of the like async.js stuff that makes it easier, we acknowledge that it can be made easier, but we still think just like developers just want to write like read file and then have the file, just like, that's what we did for decades, like nothing changed. So we diverge from Node.js in that. We diverge from Node.js in NPM. We think we can supply a better user experience than go look for an NPM module without knowing when it was last updated or how many people use it or whether it has bugs or not. We think we can do better by controlling packages to some extent, making sure that they're vetted, they work well, they integrate well with the rest of Meteor, so that when you go Meteor add HTTP or Meteor add, I don't know, XML parser, it'll just work, which is not true about NPM at the moment. So how did I get to that? Basically, those are maybe some of the main distinctions between Derby and Meteor.
How many people are a part of Meteor at this point?
We are 6 engineers, about to be 7. We have a, I guess, PM, like Silicon Speak PM is this, I guess, general role that could be many things. We have a PM joining soon, and we have an administrative assistant. So that makes us like 9 altogether or something. And we're trying to grow, pretty aggressively. Like we raise a lot of money. A lot of that is for growth. Um, it would be wrong if the only thing holding us back is enough manpower to get through all the stuff we have to get done. And we have a lot of stuff in front of us. We're about to publish a roadmap really soon, and a lot of people are kind of like unsure what we're working on and like what our plan is and when will it be available for production use and all these questions. So we're trying to address all of those questions. We have a lot of work in front of us, like a lot, like 2 years of planned work or something. That's just stuff that we like know about now. And we're trying to order those in a way that makes sense so people can use Meteor, incrementally. You don't have to wait 2 years. Like within 2 months, you'll be able to do this much, and within like 5 months after that, you'll be able to do that much, and so forth. So where was I going with that?
No, I think you answered it.
It's like having people. Yeah. So I guess what else can I say about the company? There's something really cool here about how we try to just like reason about what we're trying to do. I found that we're all, I guess, how do I say this? We can all agree on the mission, and we don't have religious debates. We always have pragmatic debates. People will say, I think we do it this way, and that could lead to a 4-hour conversation, but it's generally always calm. People are willing to change their minds and do all the time. And so that's super refreshing. It could literally be I come to the office expecting some paradigm, like this is how we should approach this or something, and then at the end of the day have the exact opposite opinion, sometimes in the same conversation, even though maybe I should not do that as much. But I think I once changed my mind in the same sentence, like starting to end. But basically, we're just like all really dedicated here. Like we're not, some of the other frameworks will say we are a Node framework. I'm not trying to I guess it sounds like I'm bashing Node. I should bash Node. I'm not bashing Node. Some frameworks say we are a Node framework. That is something we would never say because we don't think the Node community is as large as the potential web developer community. We think the potential web developer community is orders of magnitude larger than the web developer community currently, and then the Node community, which is even smaller. So we're trying to represent what any web developer would want to have, rather than what web developers that are currently using certain tools want. And that just implies a totally different way to structure the framework, and to just everything is different. So every other framework or solution or stack out there makes these assumptions. They say this works best with Rails, or or Backbone is intentionally small because of whatever, some reason A, B, C. We don't have any of those things. We're not tied to any prior assumptions, any religions of any kind. We're just trying to supply the best developer experience for building basically any app, and part of it extends to mobile apps. There's a story for how you can write a web app in Meteor and then easily use that web app to supply endpoints for data for your iOS mobile app, and we will build those bindings. So it's not even just about the web. It's this is what we believe and hope will be just the future of app development of any kind. And that just is a totally different mindset than what I think any of the other frameworks are trying to do. A lot of people kind of try to attack us and say that's stupid, that will never work, that's exactly how projects fail. They try to do too much. We acknowledge that, but we disagree that projects always fail that way. There's been a history of really successful big projects. People built operating systems and window managers and X11. It's possible to build these things. It's very hard. One of the main things we need to do is just apply proper software engineering constructs and processes, and you can build them. And will we succeed? I don't know. We hope so. It's very likely that we will not succeed for a huge set of reasons. We think we're really well positioned to try to do this, and at this point, it's just let's do the work. There's just a bunch of work. Let's do it, and it's cool that we have money because we can. A lot of the other frameworks are also struggling because they're trying to build a framework with which they'll then build an app that they hope to monetize, or all sorts of stories like that. We're in this kind of magic fantasy land, right? We just have money, go build a framework. It's kind of the dream come true. We have to make sure that we don't use that to just waste time on theorizing about grandiose components or something, and just be focused on actually shipping. Something like that, yeah.
Anybody have any questions?
Let's see it.
Let's see it.
Let's
Do you
see.
have anything you can share?
What, just Meteor? Some Meteor thing?
Some meteor things.
Ah.
Meteor showers.
So
Meteor
I saw a
Sphere.
demo on Meteor, and from what I recall, it was using Google Maps. Is that correct?
If you're talking about the most recent demo, it was just a static image, actually.
I don't remember that. Okay.
Um,
People try to show off the cool things that they do. They show you something that looks really cool, but it seems so specific. For example, what I saw using Google Maps. You're just thinking, well, my app is not using Google Maps. So you already kind of dismiss it, thinking, oh, it's too specific. You're leaving out all the basics of what I need to do. So can you show us even just the basics of Meteor? So everything you said so far sounds great, the integrated stack and things like that. But what's a really basic app that I could build?
yeah, I mean, basically just if you kind of start thinking about what apps would you like to have exist, my experience is people have such ideas. They're like, oh, I wish there was such an app, but they never built them because it just seems too daunting to even start. If I'm looking for like just one example, I can give you, like this is my side project app, and I'm going to say in advance, this is like this is not in good state. I've been working on this very slowly, but this is the app that I'm working on Meteor. I'll send you guys a link.
You can do, if you want, you can do a screen share too.
Oh, okay, let's do that. Okay.
Click on the left.
Screen share. Okay, so you guys see that?
Yep.
Let me make it bigger. Okay. Oh my God. See, so the design here is terrible. Everything is terrible. Okay, so but it works. So this is an app I built for myself because I really like electronic music, and it always takes me a long time to find music I like because I'm very picky. And over the years, I've kind of like learned to immediately dismiss 99% of the DJ sets I listen to. But what I found is that if you use SoundCloud a certain way, that you could use which tracks on SoundCloud people like to find other good music. So the idea is you start with some piece of music that you like. I'm going to just paste in a link here. This button is kind of funky, but you're starting a journey now, starting from, so, oh, wait, that's the name. So it was playing music, you guys didn't hear it. But, so what happened is I plugged in one SoundCloud URL, that's this square in the top right. And then what it does is it looks at all the people who favorited that piece of music, liked it on SoundCloud, and looks at all the other things those people liked and ranks them based on how many common likes there were. And then it maps them here where the size of the square corresponds to how popular that thing is essentially. And basically, like, immediately within a second, you get this huge variety of music that is something you'll probably like if you like this original one. So it's kind of like Pandora in a sense, I guess. But then the next steps are, there are these two buttons, inwards and outwards. I need a UX designer to help me create better concepts for these. But the idea is that at any given point you can listen to a piece of music and say, oh, I actually want something that's different than this. This is not the direction I want to be going at. I want a different subgenre, essentially. And you can click on this button, then what it does is it just creates a new set of recommendations based on the assumption that you do like this first one and you don't like this other one. And you can just keep on doing that indefinitely, so it's always going to give you these new recommendations. And then you could like listen to this other one and say, oh, I like that, and I want to go more in that direction. And then it'll create a new list of recommendations, and you can just keep doing this. And then you get these URLs. You can share these URLs with others. In the future, you'll be able to see where other people are, like what are other people listening to, and kind of like join them on their trail of musical discovery. And there'll be a front page where you can see what all the other people are listening to and kind of follow people. And the idea is for this to become a social network for people opinionated about electronic music, essentially. And the thing that is, well, not only does this project basically solve a real problem of mine, which is that it lowered the amount of time it takes for me to find music that I like from like 2 months to basically like 10 minutes. And that has basically like completely solved that problem for me. But it's also something that could become a real app, like a social app where people who really like music use it all the time. And the cool thing is basically I would never imagine building this if it were for Meteor. Like I would just not do it. I would put it on my list of projects to one day do, and it would stay there forever. And that is not true anymore. And while building this, a lot of it was I was trying to make sure that it was possible to build stuff like this. Like as I hit problems in Meteor, I asked myself, okay, is there a reasonable workaround? And every time I found that there is. Building a Meteor app, you will notice that Meteor is very preliminary. Like there are definitely things that aren't completely fleshed out. But for almost always, there's a reasonable workaround that kind of makes sense. And then we're going to be fixing those big problems. So is this a kind of app that you're talking about? Is this like, does this address the question?
It does. So this app that you built is cool. It's a cool idea, but it is very much what we're seeing on the screen is the app itself, is the business logic. And Meteor is not the business logic. So the whole reason you build Meteor is so that you can focus on the business logic, right? You don't have to bother with hooking up all of the components underneath. But since I'm the developer, of course, I want to see what is Meteor? What does it get me in place of Node and Rails and all the other frameworks that I'd have to hook up myself? So how did you build this?
Yeah, let's just look at the code shortly. I mean, and the code too. Like, I'm kind of embarrassed because this code was written kind of like very much in like middle of the night, hack like crazy, don't think at all about like structure kind of thing. But still, I could use it to kind of like show some of these. So it's on GitHub. Anybody could view it. So let's just look at this kind of shortly. Let me increase the font size. Okay. So like this is like the main page. This is the main template. So it says, this is a handlebars template. So you ask yourself, okay, what is this? How is this different than handlebars? Well, any handlebar template in Meteor is automatically reactive. So anything that you're dependent on here, it automatically knows how to detect when that changed and update the part of the UI that matters for that change. And that's a component that we call Spark that was built in-house. So a lot of other frameworks, you're going to have to define the template and then also define your own rules for in which situations do you re-render the template and which templates do you re-render. I guess they call it partials in other situations, like Handlebars calls it partials. You have to create your custom logic for re-rendering stuff on the client. Then let's look at the JS. So this works really well. All you do is define a template in HTML, and those things use the helpers. So this thing says template.main.isHome. The way that you know whether you're on the home page is by checking the session variable. Session variables are this construct that are automatically reactive. Reactive meaning if you have a UI component dependent on the session, that UI component will automatically re-render when that session variable changes. So there's a whole mechanism, what we call DEPs, that manages the dependencies between your data, which can be local or server data, and your display. So you don't have to do any management at all of like when you re-render which UI components. Like that's completely solved for you. Then if you look at the server code, you see, where's this? Server code, this is a little messy, but basically what you have here is, you basically have two constructs. You have this meteor.publish construct, where you say, we have this data. So it starts with collections. You define these collections. It's very simple, just one line definition. Do you guys see when I select text and all that? Yeah. So you define this collection, and then you can just publish parts of that collection. So meteor.publish point says, this is the publish function with an argument, and just send back the point with that corresponding point ID. And then there's a bunch of other publishes. And then any client can just go and say, let's find this here, maybe it's engine. I feel bad because the gross part about this code is all me. None of the gross part here is Meteor. You kind of have to believe me about that. If you guys want a much cleaner example, there's stuff that we have. There's examples packaged with Meteor that are really good on the website. So those are cleaner than this one, but this is real. So in client code, I can use meteor.subscribe to go and get that data. And so this manages all that for you. So with any traditional stack, you'd have to go and then set up these REST endpoints and this client mechanism to go and fetch the data from the REST endpoint, populate a local collection, and then render the UI accordingly and so forth. And then if you want to get real-time updates, you have to go and have some out-of-bound process where you're using like WebSockets or something, you pull for requests, and then go and fetch the REST endpoint yet another time and do all that. You maybe have to diff it to know what changed and only update the thing that changed. Meteor solves all that for you. You don't have to do any work. And subscribe is basically the way that you hook data in from the server to the client. So it's not a static REST endpoint. It's a live query. Whenever things change, they get sent out to the client. And the only other kind of relevant component is then there's just server methods. So this is here. It's very easy to define them, and those just work kind of just the way that just HTTP endpoints basically work. You just run a function, but part of the difference that's not here. But each time you run a method, it's in the context of a specific user. So Meteor manages all of the authentication for you. Anytime you run an action, there's always what is the current logged in user. You can store whatever fields you want on the user document. And those are sent down to the client as well as the server, so you can check, depending on which user you are, you can allow or not allow things on the client. So that's another thing where other frameworks don't do for you. You have to hook in by yourself, integration from who you are logged in on the server to the client, because maybe the server has more data than the client does. Basically, like all aspects of managing syncing of data from server to client is like you just get it for free in Meteor. And that's a huge amount of work in any other framework. I'm trying to think if there's any like other big guns here. I mean, basically, the thing with Meteor is that it supports a small set of really, really powerful constructs like this subscribe publish thing, or depths, or Spark. But then that's only the beginning. When you start using it, you just find all these small things are just simpler than they are in any other framework, because we just spend more effort in making them simpler. And it just, like over time, it just starts feeling like, wow, this is just like frictionless, and that's what I think the main thing we have to offer is not these specific big guns necessarily, but just this general sense of very low friction as you're building your app. Like you never get discouraged. You never say, oh shit, now I have to go and do this crazy thing. Instead, I'm going to go get a beer. Like you get the beer and you continue working because it's just fun and nothing's stopping you. And that's been my experience working on Sound Alchemist. So. Does that answer the question? Other questions? Is that like how do you feel when you build a Rails app with Ember or something? I don't know what apps you build.
How do I do it?
Or I mean, if you've done it, like how has it felt? Or have you tried? Or are you just curious? Or?
Well, I liked, in your introduction, you were talking about how it takes so many components to hook it up. And yeah, sometimes I'm that guy who, hey, it feels good to use stylus or less versus Sass or some of those things and hook them all together. And you're so proud of yourself when you've hooked them all together and they're working. And you're like, yeah, but you really haven't built anything at this point.
Exactly.
So I'm excited to hear about Meteor and hopefully taking out some of the headaches and the integration. It makes me think of Apple or Mac and all the systems that integrate so easily.
We hope to be even better than Apple in a sense. I guess like maybe it's like you're not allowed to say that in Tech Circus because nothing's better than Apple or something. But Apple does tech integration really well, but it's also a completely closed ecosystem. And Meteor is not. Meteor is split into packages that make sense. It's open source. You can see how those packages are built, how they're interfaced. You can build your own packages and submit them. We might accept them into Meteor Core if they're actually part of core functionality, or you can use Atmosphere, which is a third-party package system that a Meteor community member built, and put them there. So like you said, Stylus and Sass, like we support all that stuff, and the stuff that we don't support, people are building support for us. So like Twitter login was not built by us, it was built by someone else. And then we brought it into Meteor Core. So in that sense, what we hope to become is more like what Linux never became, which is a system with a proper distribution that integrates everything well, but is still fully open, and you can change what you want. Just like you then are taking the burden of what happens when it breaks. And we believe that that's totally open-ended, like you can do anything that way.
Great.
What are some of the other, so I've seen on the homepage, you run through I think there's 4 demo projects on there that really help out a lot. If you haven't tried it, you should do the homepage. There's a couple projects on there or whatever. But what are some of the other things like what you just showed us, the SoundCloud project, that you've seen that you guys think are pretty cool?
Yeah, let's look at some of these. So it's also worth pointing out that we're still early in the sense that we just shipped off a month or a bit more ago. So it's like we're seeing more growing complexity in apps, but there's this guy who built this thing it's a Hacker News clone. Let me share it with you guys. Let's see, screen share. So it's an app called Telescope, and basically it's Hacker News. There are these posts. The posts have comments. You can upvote. Oh, it says please log in first. Okay, let me log in. I'll sign up. Oh, what should I use? Oh, let's sign in with Twitter. Okay, yeah. So all the stuff that you see here is Meteor stuff, like the sign with Twitter. This whole drop down of logging in is a Meteor construct. Like you want to add accounts to your app, you just basically write 2 lines of code. You write Meteor add accounts UI, accounts Twitter, and then you add the login buttons template to your code, and it just works. You sign in, redirect me back. Okay, so now I'm logged in. Oh, fill in your email. Okay. Okay, so now I'm logged in, and then I can go to these comments, and I can go and I can upvote it, you know, and it has 2 points, whatever. It has like these permalinks or whatever. You know, share, whatever this thing does. Does that work? Oh, it's kind of funky. So, you know, this is like not a very complicated app, but have you guys seen the Hacker News code out there? Like, I've not. And so the story is like this made it possible for someone to spend a few days and build it. Let's see some other examples. There's this thing called Green Cloud. I don't know if we can access it, but there's a so this is some like cloud hosting service, and I think they have their dashboard is built in Meteor. I think we have like a secret login. Let me see if I can find the.
You want to not share your screen if you're bringing up sensitive stuff or whatever.
Nah, I mean, yeah, well, I was gonna trust you guys, but now you made me scared.
We're all friends here, so.
Where is this? Okay, so this dashboard is the real dashboard for this Green Cloud cloud hosting service, and this is built with Meteor. So it's kind of hard to tell what's going on here, but you can go to like compute cloud, create instance. Like this UI is built in Meteor. You know, so it's just like, you know, whatever you want to do. I don't know, like, does this work? You know, I create it, and now I'm going to see it appear somewhere, I think. Yeah, now it appears here. You know, so any app where data sending from client to server is like a big deal is immensely easier with Meteor, but not just that, like basically any app. Like, what would it take to build this app? You have to have like some client-side templating system or do manual jQuery stuff, and you'd have to hook up like some, you know, connection to your server and run your server infrastructure, and just the fact that Meteor solves all those basic things for you. I mean, basically the thing is most things like Meteor that try to solve like the entire stack, they get it wrong. They have wrong interfaces, and it makes it so that certain things are easy, and then you hit these big problems, and there's no way around them, and you're just stuck. And that's what like happened with, I don't know, like Wave had this like Wave robot, Wave gadget thing. That was just wrong. It didn't work. Like you couldn't actually build things with it. But Meteor doesn't hit those. Like that's at least in my experience. That's where Meteor gets it right. The interfaces make sense. When you hit limitations, you understand what those limitations are and you understand how to work around them. It's not like we've made these strong assumptions that don't always hold. The assumptions we made are assumptions that are just the general, basic assumptions that make sense for any app you want to build. At least that's how we think about it. Let me see if I have another example of something like this. Oh, there was one that I saw just. Okay, this is just like some random app that some guy built. I don't even exactly understand what the point is of this app. You write stories or something. You write interactive stories that's been written live. Run directly the story as the user writer is writing it. Write a story. Sorry, sign in. And so there are all these stories here. What are these things? And then you go to the story, and then you can edit it or something like that. There's a chat section here, whatever. So, like, I don't really understand what the point of this app is, but like, this is an app that some guy wanted to build, right? And like, it's a real app. You know, it's like whatever it is. So basically, there's no limits. Like any app that you want to build, like there are some technical limitations, stuff that we're working on, but generally, like I don't know which app would not be best built on Meteor. I mean, you want to read one of these under generic currency? What is this one? The Minotaur, the innkeeper. See how awesome this app is? We get to look at this weird poster. Are there other types of apps or something that, like, is there a sense that Meteor works well for certain things and not for others? Do you guys think?
Well, you said real time, right?
The real-time thing is kind of like a red herring. I mean, the thing about Meteor is it's just best, I think it's the best way to build an app. And then it also gives you real-time for free. Like, that's the way to think about it. Is like for other apps, you start by building it with Rails or whatever, and then you say, oh, I want this part to update in real time or whatever. Then you have to start patching those parts in part by part, adding more complexity each time, and you get bugs and stuff like that. With Meteor, you start by just saying, I'm trying to build my app, and then everything is just real time. And that's it, and it just works, basically. That's a big deal, is like at some point with an app that's not real time, you start wanting more and more of it to be real time, especially the way that apps are now built, like more and more apps are becoming real time. So there's this pressure for apps to become more real time, and it just doesn't work if you have to patch it at the end. It becomes like really, really, really hard. So Meteor solves that by just baking in real time into all aspects of the framework from day one.
I saw you had Trello up somewhere.
Right, Trello is exactly, well, this is the roadmap that we're going to be here. I'll share it. This is the roadmap we're going to be posting, I guess, probably in a few days. Trello is also a real-time app that's very much in the spirit of Meteor, and Trello is actually exactly the example. Like, we would want to believe that Trello, if they were starting, I guess not today, because Meteor is not yet baked enough for like a production app, but if they were to start 6 months from now or so, they would choose Meteor. Like, this is exactly the type of app that would work extremely well with Meteor. And Trello is also an interesting example. They have this blog post about the stack that they use. It's interesting to read that. A lot of their stack is similar to the Meteor stack. Some is different, but they rolled it all out themselves. And then at the end, they have this sentence. I'd like to quote it. Let me find this. Wait. Okay. So this is Trello talking about how they built Trello. So do we like it? We like our tech stack. And then he says, as Joel observes, we've bled all over, but I've never seen a team make an interesting app without bloodshed. And not everyone can say that they really like what they've ended up with. As a true, no component or implementation detail is necessary to its nature. However, we think this is an excellent set of open source. It's kind of like this long, complicated answer that kind of says we don't actually really like it, but it works well. And I think Meteor is better. I think like Meteor is just good. Like, I like it and it works. So I think we built a better stack than what Trello built just for their app, and they had to build it for themselves, just like every other app has to build it for themselves. We actually think Meteor is, or at least can be, just the way that people build apps, and just like we get it right, and there's no limitation. Like whenever you hit a limitation, it makes sense. You understand which change you have to make where, and you can do it, and you never get stuck. So yeah, we think that apps like Trello should definitely be built with Meteor as of some time from now, 6 months or so, or maybe a year, depending on what type of app you're building. And for now, it's still only best suited for smaller apps. There are certain limitations on server performance that don't allow for a large number of concurrent users. The number depends on how much server-heavy your app is. But I would say 6 months from now at most, this should be production ready, or at least some level of production readiness.
So now that auth is out of the way, and that was sort of one of the big hurdles, like what are people now saying that Meteor needs?
I think the two biggest complaints now are server-side performance, have to do with the way that we pull Mongo. It's kind of very detailed and technical discussion, but we understand exactly what's going on, and we have a well-defined set of changes we're going to make to resolve a large, like almost completely resolve this problem within a few months. But right now there is a problem where sometimes you hit 100% CPU and you just kind of like can't work with it. You can scale it to multiple machines and get around for that, but you have to do that too early, and we want to fix that. And then there's just a packaging system. We don't have a proper way to add third-party packages. We only support packages that are part of the Meteor core package set. And so an external contributor built this tool called Meteorite that allows you to use packages that were submitted to Atmosphere, yet another system built by external Meteor contributors. And we want to roll all of that into Meteor so it's a seamless process and create a system where people can build their own packages, put them out somewhere, have people try to use them, and then over time flush them out, make them better, and then have them eventually be integrated into Meteor core. So we're trying to get this packaging scheme that's neither the NPM scheme nor like the closed, I guess, I don't know, Apple thing or something, where there's both totally open external packages that anyone can build and use. There's the official vetted internal packages, and there's a process for bringing packages from this like random external package into core and get someone famous. Someone will be able to say, I built the package that ended up in Meteor core that supports whatever, Twitter or something. And we think people will want that for sure. And also there'll be a lot of what we're trying to do is get people to want to use Meteor. We want people to have incentives for using Meteor. One of them is, like, if Meteor becomes big and you build Twitter support, you can be famous forever for that. We would like for that to be something that motivates people to build these things. We hope that the Ruby on Rails thing can happen again for Meteor, maybe even more, where a lot of people build their careers around like being these Meteor experts on various things, or building apps, writing books, or whatever. I kind of diverged from the question, but so packaging basically. And then there's just after that there's a long list of small requests that we need to do before we can release version 1.0. And that's the stuff that's on the roadmap that will be, as I said, posted in a few days. But there's stuff like having better server-side rendering. Right now you load the page, maybe you guys saw, the pages always load in this loading state and then display the data. So we need to fix that. We need the server to send down the data initially, either by sending it raw HTML or by sending the data and have it initially rendered on the client. But either way, we can't have this initial Flickr state on every app. And what other kind of interesting things? A better forms abstraction. We want to build something kind of equivalent to AngularJS's two-way data binding. We have a design for that. We just have to kind of finish it. We're also going to integrate some ideas from Knockout. They have this view model idea. We like that. We're going to do something like that.
What's happening? This is Cass.
That was Sound Optimist. And then going forward, stuff that we're not planning on working on in the kind of foreseeable future. Well, I guess things that we're not going to work on for version 1.0 is stuff like SQL support that we're going to need to support. Right now, we only support Mongo, but there's nothing inherent in the framework that's dedicated to Mongo. It's just the first thing we chose to support because it's the easiest. But we're going to have SQL and Redis and all those things that people like. It's a bit more complicated for us to do it because we do this thing called latency compensation, where the client has a full copy of the database, so you never have to go to the server to fetch data, other than subscriptions that send data down. So that makes it a bit trickier for us to build new database support. We have to build on server and on client. That's just why it's not just a trivial thing of just integrating with some SQL library. And stuff like improved mobile experience. Like right now, there's battery life problems. Isn't directly related to Meteor. Any real-time app that keeps an open connection on mobile will be slow. So we need to kind of optimize it for that. Say on mobile, maybe it's not completely real time. You don't keep an open connection. You only sync once in a while. Just solve stuff around that. There's a bunch of stuff. There's a testing framework that we plan to build. People are building apps and they're kind of hitting testing. They would like to have an integrated way to write tests with their app in Meteor. We're going to solve that. We're going to have a proper testing framework that's built directly for Meteor that just works as easily as Meteor works in all other things. But that's later on. And there's people want to use different templating systems. Right now we only support handlebars well. There's someone out there working on Blade. Support Blade is some evolution of Jade or something like that. So we're going to try to get that in. Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of other small things. That's my set of randomly chosen, seemingly interesting things that we are going to be working on. But basically there's as I said, a year or two's worth of stuff that we know that we need to do. depending on how quickly we hire. And it's just basically like anytime a user complains, like if a developer tried to do something and hit a problem, didn't know how to work around a bug or something, then that's a problem. We need to fix it. Like we don't get any breaks. Like if somebody was trying to do something that's too hard, we have to fix it. So there's lots of stuff like that. And we just respond to GitHub issues all the time. We look at pull requests all the time. We have a rotation where each week 2 of us are on pull requests and GitHub issue rotation. There's always a lot of work there. It's never like easy. So I would just say, anybody who starts using Meteor and hits problems should just definitely tell us about them. And hopefully you guys will see that we respond to them quickly and, there shouldn't be that many limitations.
What else?
You had asked in the email about which tools we use. I'll just quickly say which tools we use if you guys care. We use Asana for internal task management. We use GitHub, Asana, ASANA. That's where Jeff and I worked before Meteor. That's how we met. We use GitHub for GitHub and public-facing like issue discussion and stuff like that. We use HackPad for internal docs, which is an evolution of Etherpad that has formatting as well. We use what else do we have? We use Fabricator, PHAB. Fabricator is our code review tool. That's how we do internal code reviews. Is that it? Emacs, almost all of us use Emacs. I don't know. That's basically what we use.
It feels like Meteor blurs the line between client and server. Is that purposeful, or is there a way to specifically segregate code to say this is only server code?
I would say you're kind of right. It kind of does blur, but it actually. So the first answer is yes. Like any file that you put inside a server directory or a client directory gets run only on server or only on client. In addition, you can write if meteor.isServer anywhere in your code, or if meteor.isClient and have code that runs only on client or on server. The blurring thing is partly intentional. We want as many APIs as possible to work as is on client and on server. That means it's easier to refactor your code, move stuff from client to server. It's easier to run like validation on client and on server and all these things. But there's nothing in the way we set it up that makes it hard in any way to distinguish those. And many people just immediately split their projects into client subdirectory and the server subdirectory and just have everything separate other than specific files in common or something. And that's a very common pattern.
Is there a way to specifically say, I don't want this code to get delivered to the client?
Yeah, you put it in a server directory.
Okay.
And server can appear anywhere in the past. It could be like something / something / server / something. And that will also work.
Oh, cool.
Anything else? Cool, man. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we sign off?
Oh, wow. So many things I like to talk about. I'd like to know so much about Phoenix. I'd like to know what you guys are doing. And I'd like to tell you about Prop 37 in California and talk about marijuana legalization. But,
are you surprised that other states beat California to recreate?
California is kind of weird. Everything's weird about California. I don't know. It seems like this state of hippies, but actually isn't. It's like there's actually a lot of rednecks in California. They're just kind of like hiding. You think they're not there, but there are actually a lot of them.
In San Francisco?
No, not San Francisco, California.
Yeah, okay.
No, there are no rednecks in San Francisco. They get shot. No, I mean, whatever. I mean, actually, a friend of mine worked on the campaign both in California and now in Colorado. So it's the same people working on them. It doesn't matter which state gets it first. It's hopefully, a domino effect or something. It just starts somewhere and ends up everywhere. So yeah, go Washington and Colorado. But no, I don't have anything specific else about Meteor that I'd like to talk about.
What are some of the major gotchas with using Meteor? Or
So
like,
what are the major gotchas?
that don't work for Meteor?
So the stuff that currently it's stuff having to do with server performance. If you have apps that write a lot of data very quickly, for example, somebody wrote a drawing app that every time you move your mouse, it sends a request to the server, drawing a new point. That kind of like collapsed on load, and that has to do with the server performance stuff that we understand and are working on. But that shouldn't be a problem for any kind of like, simple app where just like if, some reasonable amount of users are just clicking stuff around. And then mobile performance, as I said, battery life kind of like dies really terribly. Let me just get a charger so I don't die. Oh no, it's these new Apple connectors for, wait. Do you know about this thing where the new
Yeah, it's a bummer because I had a bunch of other chargers and now they don't work.
Oh my god, it's terrible. Wait, let me hook this up.
It's the brand new high obsolescence package.
Yes. Brand new now. I have to walk up and down stairs.
So there's battery life on mobile. This is, as I said, the problem with real-time apps in general, not just Meteor, but because you don't do anything special on mobile, then just basically your battery will die in like a very short period of time on mobile. What other gotchas? They're just generally not. A lot of things aren't yet packaged for Meteor, so you have to go through some hoops to use NPM directly at times. But it's not something you can't work around. It's just more inconvenient than we would like it to be. There's.
What's the process of taking a regular NPM package and turning it into a Meteor package?
That's one of the things that we don't have a great answer for now, and is part of what we'll be working on in the broader package system that we're actively working on now. So right now, you do weird things. Like you can just copy over the NPM files into a package manually. There's some hack where you put the NPM module inside the public directory and then use it that way. And we're going to just basically solve that. Like we just don't have that solution yet. Let me see the other gotchas. There's no joins, but that's a limitation of Mongo. But we could solve that in subscriptions. It's kind of tricky to do that. There's no bidirectional data binding, so sometimes it's a little harder than it needs to be to set up forms, like harder than Angular, but we're working on that. There's no Windows support right now. I mean, it works. There's an external contributor that built Windows support. You go to win.meteor.com, but that's not built by us. So it works, but we're not maintaining it. Going forward, we will have to put nothing to maintain that as part of Meteor. I think those are the main things. You can't upload a file. There's just no support for that now. But people have worked around that. They've, you upload to S3 or something like that. It's kind of like you have to, that's part of the things where you still have to do some of that manual, like web, hooking stuff together yourself. But that's also something we're going to just solve. I think that's the main stuff. Animation, sometimes animation is a little tricky, specifically for the case when you're deleting an item from a collection and you want to show that animated nicely. Because Meteor manages re-rendering the display automatically for you, what happens is it immediately re-renders a display without that element there. And so there's no opportunity to put in some CSS3 class or something like that to say animate this. And what you need to do is you need to introduce a delay. You need to say, remove this item, but don't reflect that change immediately. Wait a second until the local database reflects that change. And then during that second, you can put an additional class. So we don't have support for that now. As far as I know, there's no way to animate deleting an item from a collection. Specifically for deleting. You can animate adding an item. You're doing other operations, but not deleting. And that's also on our list of things we need to be working on. There's no internationalization, if that matters, to your app. I think those are the main things that you might hit. If there are more, I would like to know about them. So if you guys try using Meteor and you feel like any of what I said does not correspond to reality, I would very much want an email explaining that. That would be super helpful. Like this is not like when Mongo says web scale and it turns out it doesn't work. This is real. Like we believe this is real. If it's not, then we want to know about it and make it real. Like so don't give us any just like try it and it should be awesome. And if it's not, tell me.
All right. We're all out of words to throw at you, so I'll let you get back to enjoying. What were you drinking?
I don't know. This place only has these. We're in this temporary place now because they're renovating our office. they only have these kind of like really special seeming like German beers and stuff because San Francisco hipsters need to drink special things to feel good about themselves. Um,
Apps.
like yeah, like I would prefer just having PBR, right? Or like Tecate is what I drink around here many times. But so I don't know. I just choose the one that seems least weird. So this was at least a lager. So anyways, this is what it is. And there's a story here. It says, "Why cans?"
You should post that right on the story page that you showed us earlier.
Oh, that's a good story. Yeah. Maybe I will.
All right, man. Well, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, and enjoy Phoenix. And this looks like a nice group. I'm happy you guys meet and like share your thoughts or something. It looks cool from what I can sense.
It's pretty fun. You should come to Phoenix sometime.
Yeah, I should.
You're invited. I officially invited you to Phoenix.
Thank you. I'll try to make it sometime.
All right, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tony, and all those. Bye.